welcome to the first edition of Palooza Tuesday. I'm Tracy O'Rourke, the Chief Innovation Officer at GoLeanSixSigma.com and one of the instructors for the Lean Six Sigma Green and Black Belt courses at UC San Diego Extension. I'm really happy to be here with all of you, and I'm very excited to kick off this event. What is Palooza Tuesday and why are we here? Palooza Tuesday is a series of webinar-like learning sessions every Tuesday for the next several weeks with the same purpose as the Process Palooza event, which is some of you may be familiar with. We've hosted Process Palooza in the past to celebrate UC San Diego's commitment to business excellence, operational efficiency, and continuous improvement. And many of you know we had Process Palooza planned this year on May 25th. And like the rest of the world, we had to shift gears and get creative about a way to bring people together in the midst of the coronavirus. That's how Palooza Tuesday was born. The spirit of Process Palooza will not be dampened. And we will continue to shine a light on continuous improvement projects at UC San Diego, the higher education landscape, as well as local businesses. In the wake of the coronavirus, we're bringing the Process Palooza spirit to the forefront. And since we couldn't bring and welcome you to Process Palooza 2020, we are welcoming you to UC San Diego's Palooza Tuesday. Woohoo! So a lot of you are joining today and you're from higher education and have your own experiences. But for those unfamiliar, UC San Diego transitioned to nearly 100% remote teaching and learning almost overnight. And we feel that because continuous improvement is so ingrained in the culture that we were able to leverage our experience for a successful transition. We also believe that our dedication to Lean Six Sigma as a method positions us to maintain operations and get through this crisis as best as we can. Before going any further, I'd like to play a video that underscores this concept. You'll hear from our campus leaders on the importance of continuous improvement at UC San Diego.
Continuous improvement to me is a mindset. It's a way of looking at not just what we do, but how we do it. And it's also a lot of keeping an open mind.
And so the essence of, to me, for continuous improvement is to improve how quickly we can deliver and how efficiently we can deliver what we need for the communities.
Creating an agile and sustainable and supportive infrastructure through dedication to service and people and stewardship. And so that whole philosophy became part of how we started to look at the work at the university. And the core to this is Lean Six Sigma, which is a very powerful methodology. It gives measurable results.
It's a great set of tools. It's quantitative and qualitative all in one. It's got some very rich rigor to it.
Over time, we've trained more than 3,000 individuals in different levels of Lean Six Sigma.
This is so phenomenal for higher education and practically most businesses to have that many people. And what also struck me is this was all bottom up.
As we rolled out Lean Six Sigma training across our organization, we quickly realized the benefits to our staff and our processes. In fact, we wanted to keep this momentum going and involve the entire university in a very fun and engaging way. That's how Process Palooza came about. Process Palooza is a conference, an expo, and a competition all rolled into one with a focus on excellence and continuous improvement.
It's about co-creation, and it's about building processes that aren't top-down, but come out of a collaborative problem-solving approach.
In the wake of the pandemic and the larger financial impacts on the state and the institution, and I think that our Lean Six Sigma trained staff and the Process Palooza mindset are going to be key to helping us keep going on this. So people might wonder whether it's really part of our mission as UC San Diego to help other institutions get started on their continuous improvement journey. And I think the answer is a resounding yes. Our mission as a public institution is to the people of the state of California and the nation and the world. We have to look beyond our walls and serve the broader society.
So there are an awful lot of people around this great state of California that are getting to learn more about what's going on here at UC San Diego.
I love this video because it highlights how UC San Diego leaders are supporting Lean Six Sigma, which is one of the most important criteria to success. And our personal lives, work lives, our institutions has been upended these last few months. But we think through this series, we can provide you some support, lessons, actionable takeaways, and inspiration as we all try to figure out where to go from here. We'll be here on Zoom every Tuesday, thanks to our sponsor, Quali Build. Quali Build allows you to create powerful apps with digital forms and automated approvals. So before we launch into our first session, I wanted to give you a teaser about next week. Next Tuesday, you can look forward to hearing from a panel of folks from various functions at UC San Diego. They'll be discussing different strategies about how they've successfully deployed and embraced Lean Six Sigma. They've done an amazing job, so you don't want to miss it. And you're going to hear from them. The session is called Empowerment and Innovation, Cultivating a Continuous Improvement Movement. And then the following week, you'll hear the story of the United States Postal Service, their Lean journey and what they've done to incorporate Lean into the operation. So I just wanted to get you a little bit excited about the next couple of weeks. And so before we get started with our presentation, we're going to bring some panelists in to talk with you, but I'm going to explain how this will work. You're going to use the chat feature for general discussion, or if you experience a technical difficulty. We have behind the scenes cohorts monitoring that, and we're going to save Q&A for the end. And we ask that you put your questions, your specific questions, in the Q&A box, not the chat, so we can easily sort and respond. And finally, we do have a prize to give away at the end. It's a $500 discount voucher for a select project management course or a Lean Six Sigma class from UC San Diego Extension. And we'll give away that at the end, but you need to pay close attention during the workshop and the session to answer the question I'm going to ask you in order to win. So that's enough for me. Let me start the introduction for today's session. The first session of the Palooza Tuesday series is called The Future of Lean Six Sigma Across Higher Education. Our panel moderator is Katie Mankins. She's the Director of Special Projects in the Office of the Chief Information Officer at UC Santa Barbara. All right, Katie, take it away.
Thank you so much, Tracy. We're really excited to be here and be doing this panel on Lean Six Sigma and higher ed. We're going to be joined by some higher education leaders who have been very proactive in implementing programs at their institutions, and they're going to share some of their insights as they have adopted these techniques across the institution and also even into the wider communities. So let's go ahead and start meeting the members of our panel. First, I'd like to introduce Eric Olson from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Eric, if you could join us on screen, that would be just great.
And I
Eric.
Thank you, Katie.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. And I'm real happy to be here. I'm excited. This is my first Process Palooza, so I'm excited to see how this goes, even though it's in different format. My name is Eric Olson. I'm the Chair of Industrial Technology and Packaging at Cal Poly, and I'm also the Director of Central Coast Lean, which is a community building project we have to build a community of lean practice on the Central Coast. So happy to be here.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to introduce Mark Myers, who is an independent consultant formerly with San Diego State University's Process Improvement Program. Mark, thanks for being here today.
Katie, thank you again for having us. And as Katie mentioned, I was the former program director at SDSU for their process improvement programs. I had an opportunity while I was there. I worked with companies from a variety of different industries, everything from manufacturing to construction, healthcare, nonprofits, and defense. I completed the SDSU Lean Enterprise Program in 2012, the UCSD Lean Six Sigma Green Belt in 2018, and I'm actually the Lean Six Sigma Black Belt next week. Currently, I am working on applying process improvement, working for some local nonprofits.
Excellent, thank you so much. Next up is Chris DeMarco from UC Berkeley. Chris, thanks for joining the panel, and Chris is going to be sharing some insights from the Business Process Management Office at Berkeley. Chris?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Katie. It's a true honor to be here. As Katie mentioned, I'm from UC Berkeley. I'm an organizational consultant. I'm with an office called the Business Process Management Office that really is focused on driving process excellence, change management, and continuous improvement. I did my green belt work at UC Berkeley, and I did my black belt work through Villanova University. And I spent some time in industry. I've been at Berkeley about 7 years. I spent 7 years in the genetics industry and 7 years in nanotech as well. So a lot of process improvement along the way has been my journey, and it's a true honor to be here. So thank you, Katie.
Thank you so much. We're pleased to have you. Next, we have Bradley Solenberger from UC San Diego. Brad, thanks for joining the panel today.
You're muted, Brad. Somebody had to say that during this thing.
Yeah,
right?
What a bad start. Hey, thanks, Eric. My name is Brad Solenberger from the Office of Operational Strategic Initiatives at UC San Diego. So our office was born out of the first ever strategic plan at UC San Diego, and our job is to manage a lot of the key initiatives that stretch across multiple VC areas within the university system. And that can be anything from strategic planning to project management, but also continuous improvement, which is many of the projects that I manage for our portfolio. I have a green belt, I have 2 black belts. One I received from UC San Diego Extension and their excellent program. And I'm excited to be here and contribute to the excellent voices and the expertise that is here today.
Great, thank you so much. We're excited to have you as well. And finally, I'd like to introduce the last member of our panel, Yura Shawalski from UC Santa Barbara.
Hi, Katie.
Hi,
thank you all. My name is Yura Shawalski, and as Katie said, I'm with UC Santa Barbara. I'm the Business Systems Project Manager in the Process Innovation team. And our team sits in the College of Letters and Science Information Technology Department, and we really grew from a need for process improvement in our college and on campus after we introduced a new system, in this case DocuSign. We really realized that we needed to think bigger and really look at process improvement before we started to digitize these paper processes. So I earned my green belt in the first cohort that UC Santa Barbara brought in last year through UC San Diego Extension. And now we're on cohort 2, and I'm really excited to grow the program through this sort of more grassroots approach. But COVID definitely has changed things, so we can see a lot of growth and changes happening because of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Yura, and again, thanks for being part of the panel. We would like to do a quick audience poll to get to know you, members of the audience, and find out a little bit more about you all. So if we could go ahead and launch that poll, that would be great. Tracy, what do you think are we going to find out about our audience members? Are they folks that are been to use the Process Palooza before, people who are already working with Lean? What do you think?
Well, you know, yes, if they've come to Process Palooza before, I think we're going to have some that are, this is their first time and maybe they don't know a lot about Lean Six Sigma and they're just getting started. And then I think for sure it's going to be zealots of continuous improvement. I mean, I'm a zealot. Aren't you a zealot?
Well, the reason we're here is we want to make this work and spread the word.
Yeah, we've all drunk a little bit of the Kool-Aid, right?
That's right.
It's pretty tasty Kool-Aid. In fact, I can't even think about the number of extra opportunities we have, like signing up for the rest of the Process Palooza Tuesdays. to do. So I think we can all share a lot of information. How's our poll looking?
I think we should go ahead and close it and see what the results are.
So look at this. We've got a mixture of folks who are fairly novice, don't know, but 27% of folks have heard the term but aren't that familiar, or 39% introductory training. So people have some familiarity and even contributed on a project. That's great. And then we have about another 33% or so of folks who have had more training and done some project work. So that's really excellent.
Yeah, and you know, that proves my hypotheses wrong. I thought there would be more experts here, but apparently we have a lot of new people, which is wonderful. This is a great way to get introduced to Lean Six Sigma. So thank you for participating in the poll.
Indeed, thank you so much. It's great to know a little bit more about the folks who are listening in on our discussion. So we'll look forward to some of the questions that you all may be asking during the panel, and then we will be setting aside some time for Q&A, as Tracy mentioned. So the way we're going to start out is we're going to ask some individual questions of each of our panelists so that you can get to know them a bit better. So I'm going to start first with a question for Mark. Mark, if a campus or an institution is new to Lean Six Sigma and continuous improvement, do you have any advice for how best to select the first set of projects?
Yeah, I would say one of the most important things, you know, critical almost, is support from senior management. Getting their senior management support is important for getting buy-in and other stakeholders to buy into what you're trying to achieve. Also getting influencers to kind of get on the bus is also helpful. You want to look for projects that have the greatest impact that are also still aligned with your organizational strategy or the university's strategy. Looking for quick wins, you're looking for creativity before capital, we like to say. Things that are highly visible, projects that work across the different functional groups, and you know, trying to maximize exposure and reducing some of that voice of department or silo type of thinking. But you also want to look for something that that is achievable. You're not going to try to boil the ocean. You know, you're not going to solve everything all at once, and so you want to look for something that you can achieve and that also is highly visible, so that other people start seeing what you're doing and go, oh, that's great, can you do that, you know, help us in our department. Other things you want to look for is, you know, you want to look for things that are quantifiable and measurable, things that you either have sufficient data or the data can be obtained. Look at existing problems, things that have to do with customer satisfaction and you know, enhancing long-term performance. So
I think that's a really great way to frame it, such that you get support from your senior leaders and executives for the program early, because you're doing things that have business value for them.
Right.
So,
and Mark, I also want to say and tell everybody, you know, it doesn't always have to be your hiring process.
Right.
I don't know how many hiring processes you guys have done, but it's always the hiring process.
That's very true. Yeah.
So if we visualize continuing this journey from starting a program into getting some initial people trained, once the initial set of people get trained on Lean Six Sigma, how do you visualize moving from the classroom to sharing and applying that knowledge with others on campus?
Thank you, Katie. I really like that Mark used the word influencers, because that's really sort of how we have approached this, with sort of a community of influencers. As I mentioned earlier, we are going through cohorts, so a small group of folks who are going through the Greenbelt training, and they were really picked strategically within different departments on campus to try and influence within their departments, make those minor changes. And the great thing about the Greenbelt is that you do a project, and so folks were bringing in projects from their actual workspace, completing them and showing, including folks on their team. So we're sort of spreading the word about Lean Six Sigma in the department, and really sort of getting the knowledge and the lingo out there, just make it more approachable. And we've also worked on a lot of sort of smaller departments doing yellow belts training, just again, get the word out. And beyond that, what we've done is use that cohort to help to bring in other new systems to campus. So an example, we have a process mapping system that we're using for us. We're using ProMap, and we've signed a contract for that. And we use the cohort for Lean Six Sigma to learn how to use ProMap, and again, spread the word, start using that in their department. And we're going to continue that in other digital transformation initiatives, including we're using it in DocuSign, and for a new system that we're bringing on campus, Nintex, for no-code, low-code workflow. And really the goal is to build those communities, use Lean Six Sigma methodologies in projects, so it becomes just sort of the knowledge and the language of the campus. So everyone's always thinking about process improvement, whether it's a small project or a large project, and we can sort of bring in parts of that in everything we're touching. So I think it's really helped to grow, and a lot of that we've learned from the other communities, from UC San Diego, how they have grown their community outside of within the college, as well as in the San Diego community. And so we're trying to take that same approach, working with folks like on this panel here, building up this knowledge outside of our university so we can learn and we can help to bring that information back to our campus.
Perfect. And speaking of building momentum and increasing adoption, Brad, how have you been invigorating the grassroots adoption of Lean Six Sigma on campus and encouraging the momentum needed to sustain the methodology over time?
Well, thanks for teeing me up there. And it was great to see the outcome of that poll result, because there are a lot of people new to Lean Six Sigma and the discipline. So if people are trying to wonder, well, how do you create the grassroots? The answer is you are the grassroots, everybody that's the majority of people that are here. So the grassroots of a lean movement is as, if not more important than the formal consecration of a continuous improvement culture, whether it's in higher education or any other industry. So the word culture, using a sociological definition, would say that culture is the outcome of blending laws, but also with societal norms. So to follow through on that line of thought, in order to establish a culture of continuous improvement, the laws are what senior leadership may require. So putting white belt material as required onboarding training, for example. But the norms have to be grassroots manifestation of that culture. It has to be organic, and it can't not necessarily be codified. It could be a poster session, a regular newsletter. It could be pop-up events like Process Palooza, or a regular meeting of a community of practice. It could be all the above and more. So what can you do to nurture the grassroots? I would say the best thing that you can do here as a participant is to be an enthusiast, to get your black belt or green belt, and to help nurture the grassroots movements that are happening at your university with your own talent and involvement. And at minimum, just give it your voice and be a champion of these organic cultural tentpoles. If you're a leader, you can potentially seed some of the ideas for the staff to take on, but you also have to be prepared to be hands-off and let it manifest in whatever form the larger group takes it. So unfortunately, I can't really say what the game plan should be for establishing and sustaining momentum for grassroots efforts, because there's really not a best roots practice for it, or a best practice for it. The grassroots component of establishing a lean culture is probably the least prescribed part of the journey, and that's because it's going to look completely different from one place to the next. All you can do is look for it and support it when it happens. Otherwise, it's not organic, and staff will be able to tell that. So the biggest keys to success for UC San Diego, I would say, has been partnering with the training programs to encourage participation and to raise awareness of these grassroots efforts when they occur. So our Yellow Belt class, UCSD Extensions, Green Belt, and Black Belt do this very well.
That's really great info. And I think it's particularly important to say that this is different no matter where, depending on where you are, because it's tied to the culture of the institution. So as we go forward and we continue a program, I'm thinking about what do you do about thinking how to refine that program once it's been in operations for a while. So Chris, you've had the Business Process Management Office up and running for, I think, 1.5 years or so, but you've had process improvement initiatives going on at Berkeley for longer than that. If you could go back in time, what would you do differently to make process improvement initiatives even better?
Sure. So my answer here is twofold, and I'm going to break down both of the components. The first is what I call process architecture, and the second is to utilize a central process repository. So you heard Yura mention ProMap. That's just a tool, so we never want to throw tool at a problem, but having a central process library or repository is the second piece. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about each of the two pieces, process architecture and having a process repository. And what this really means is when you do run a project looking at removing waste and using some of the tools from Lean Six Sigma, you're using a systematic problem-solving methodology to remove waste and make processes more efficient. And when you do that, the artifacts of those processes have to go somewhere. And if they just get rolled up in a corner or end up on someone's hard drive, that's not transparency to the entire institution. So what I'm driving here is a way, as Mark Myers had mentioned, to drive towards strategic alignment to the mission of the institution. And that's where process architecture comes in. Process architecture is a visual model or framework of end-to-end processes of an organization that really is connected to the overall mission. So it's thinking end-to-end. So what I mean here, if we think about research in our institution, we would think about all the research that goes on from an end-to-end, kind of from an idea to publishing. Somewhere in there is something like research administration that we all understand. So if we broke research administration down into an end-to-end and thought about proposal development all the way to close, so propose to close, okay? So this aligns to the research mission. So at UC Berkeley, we have a mission of research, teaching, and public service. As Eric mentioned, human resources, right? Hiring is a big one. Everybody works on improving hiring and onboarding processes. I've been stuck in that world for 1.5 years right now, okay? But if we think about human resources from a process architecture or framework, we're talking about human resources at the highest level, but we're really thinking about where hiring a grad student fits in or hiring a postdoc fits into human resources from end to end. So thinking about human resources from hire to transition, or some people in industry you hear hire to retire. That's another example. The third quick example of architecture is procurement. You hear procure to pay, right? These are end-to-ends that fit into an architecture that fits your institution to drive strategic alignment and the execution of strategic processes. That's the architecture. It is coupled with where the artifacts of improvement initiatives go, which is the central process library or repository, and in this case, which is ProMap. So ProMap is just a place that all these processes go. Instead of Visio and Lucid on someone's hard drive or where it is, it goes to a central place that is transparent to all of the campus that uses a feedback loop where everybody can provide improvements on how these processes can get better. So every time you deploy a Lean Six Sigma project, it goes into the central repository. So you make an improvement and you can return to it and continuously improve that. So you're able to build in the iterative nature of continuous improvement. So in conclusion, it's really the coupling of process architecture together with a central repository of a process library that is kind of like an index card catalog. So if you could imagine going to a library with no index card catalog and looking for the sci-fi section, you'd never find it. Your books would be scattered. So this really gives you an indexing through the architecture that sets up your process repository to find the human resources processes, to find the research administration processes, to find the procurement processes when you need to find them and see them to continually improve them.
Chris, I think that makes a lot of sense, because so many times when folks do undertake a process improvement initiative and you get folks trained, you get them excited, you get them documenting current state processes, even documenting future state, the way things are going to be better. But as soon as those process diagrams are documented, if they just become shelfware and they're not used or they're not kept refreshed, then there's no benefit to the rest of campus to be able to share common process assets and be able to say, hey, my process that I'm working on is part of a larger process. And I think that that's really key to having an understanding of there are many shared processes, and like hiring, but there's no reason for each department to have to document it on their own or do it their own way. So we're going to transition from.
And also, Katie, I also want to say I would love to get a tour sometime, Chris. Like when you set up your tour sign for that repository, I think we'd all like to see what that looks like.
Yeah, it really is.
Tickets.
Yeah, it's really pulling from process management, and for those ProMap users, it's key because the architecture is your foldering structure within ProMap. Because ProMap will end up being the wild, wild west. You don't want to throw a tool at a problem, right? The tool is just the library. The architecture is what goes into the library, and it takes time and a lot of sponsorship to get it right.
Well, we've got some questions coming in via the Q&A about getting links to these tools. So we're going to try and put those in. But I would like to take a break for another interactive audience poll, if we can, to just do a bit of a reset and get folks thinking about the next stage of our discussion. So if we could bring up the next poll. We wanted to ask members of the audience today about how COVID-19 has impacted your use of Lean Six Sigma, continuous improvement techniques in your daily work. So let's take a look at that and see how folks answer. Tracy, panelists, what do you think people are doing with it on this topic?
Well, you know, in spite of the unfortunate circumstances that we are in, I have been inspired by many people in their abilities to react to these new problems and standing up processes that did not exist from scratch in a jiffy. From grocery stores, you know, putting on masks and the process of letting people in, to people really, process improvement groups really transforming how they help people in their organizations. Maybe it's, you know, helping them to get standing up online and creating support that way. So it has been very inspiring what I've seen. And then we're seeing a lot of stories about how they're using these tools and techniques to look at supply chain and really some of the problems that are arising because of COVID. So it's been at least a light in what could be perceived as, you know, an issue that we all have to face globally.
Tracy, go ahead, Eric.
I was just going to say I've been sort of impressed by the focus that it's caused. I think in Lean we talk a lot about value and what's important, right? And Chris talked about how to, you know, make sure that architecture is connected to organizational goals. But you know, when you start saying, okay, well, what do I really have to do here? You know, hopefully people are making sort of good, you know, value-centric choices about what they're going to improve and fix.
And there is, apparently there is some comment online about, well, what's Lean Six Sigma? So just really quickly, we like to say it's a way to improve processes. Anything we do, all products and services are delivered by a process, a series of steps to deliver a product or service. And when those are not working optimally, you apply Lean Six Sigma or process improvement to make it better. So I just wanted to throw that out there in case we have really new people on here.
I think also paramount to that is the focus on the customer. So when we think about whether a process is running efficiently or not, it's all to the subjugation of the customer and what are their requirements for a successful process. You know, the managerial function, the business functions, lives to serve the business function itself. So if we step back and we think about it from the customer point of view, that's where we get the true knowledge about, you know, what is an optimal process and how do we get there.
And I think,
Brad, thank you.
why in a way that I'm interested to see the responses to the poll and why COVID has really pushed people, because it really has become about the customer making a lot of the decisions for themselves to make the processes work, to get the work done. And so it's forced folks to make changes and learn things that they weren't, ready to learn maybe, but it's really brought a lot of major changes to at least on our campus, a lot of business processes that were very paper-based or slow, and making so that the customer has their voices really being heard through all of this.
That is exactly true. Bringing up the notion of the community, though, Tracy brought up some examples of around the community, seeing different people adapt in different ways to change their normal routines, make it possible to do them remotely or to do them with extra levels of security or extra levels of social distancing. So it's definitely had an impact, and I think it's a tribute to the community that folks aren't forgetting to do the normal problem-solving techniques. That nobody's throwing it away. We're just trying to do it more rapidly. And I think our poll responses kind of show that. We've got 46% of our respondents have said it's increased the urgency or the speed of adoption. But we do have 32% saying it diverted attention away from formal problem-solving process improvement techniques, so people are just trying to do the best they can. Minority, 8%, stopped adoption for now, probably because of more pressing concerns, and 18% no impact. So that's interesting. I think the overall tendency is making it very clear that there's an urgent need to improve our processes, and certainly, as Yura mentioned, move away from those paper-based ones, because no one's going to be handling pieces of paper when everyone is working remotely. But going back to the kind of the community-based piece of things, Eric, I wanted to ask you a question about your establishment of the Central Coast Lean chapter. How did you decide to move beyond your campus and its integration of Lean into the curriculum for students, as well as using those techniques around campus? But how did you decide to extend it into the broader community?
Yeah, and I don't know it was a real conscious decision on my part. Certainly there's a maturity continuum. As you get sort of better internally and you fix things, there's a sort of a need and a desire to sort of maybe focus outward a little bit more, and we're definitely sort of doing that. But one of the things that I came into when I came into Cal Poly like 16 years ago, there was very little of a lean scene or activities around campus or even within the community. And I needed some folks to play with, right? I think lean sort of wants to attract best practices from different organizations and communities and stuff. And if we can get people together, I think we all tend to be a little more effective. I even think back to the early days of Toyota. If they had just kept everything they were doing a secret, we wouldn't be here talking about this stuff a lot, right? Mm-hmm. So lean folks tend to be very sharing, very giving type people. And I can look at somebody else's process and have some takeaways that make my process better. And that's something I really enjoy. So we've always, so that was part of the auspices for Central Coast Lean, where we've got people from banking, from community government, from different manufacturers, different service organizations, all trying to do this thing we're calling lean and trying to get better together.
Eric, that's a great point. I mean, you can learn so much from other areas, even if it's a banking business. Processes don't repeat, but they rhyme. And in the university setting, there's still lessons to be learned from looking externally. Right. Waste is waste. Doesn't matter where it exists.
Right. Another thing too is as we run Kaizen events and stuff, and I would encourage other organizations to do this, invite people from the community into your Kaizen event. The community also does hiring, so you can invite some of those folks who maybe hire people a little faster or differently than we do inside universities, and you can learn a lot. You can learn a lot from the outside.
For the audience out there that might not know Kaizen, Kaizen's a Japanese word, and just to let people know, it's a quick burst of improvement. So oftentimes it's 3 days, you get subject matter experts and you pick kind of areas to work in and really hammer through improvements together. So Kaizen's a Japanese word, and I just want to say there's this big community of whether it's Toyota, we're in higher education. It's very important to use and find the tools that fit the culture you are in. Not everything's going to work, right? We have a very tremendous, difficult time sometimes bringing things from production in, even though there's tons of great tools and adopting into higher ed. So all these areas are very important to learn.
Chris, that's go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say that talking about that cross-functional pollination of people from different industries, is amazing. When we would have a group of students from, we'd have somebody from a food bank and somebody from a guitar manufacturer and somebody from a construction company, we would always encourage them to hey, take one of your people and put them on a project that's completely unrelated. And the benefits of that are just incredible, because for the company hosting it, they have somebody who's seeing it with fresh new eyes, and it's not so close to it that they're not afraid to ask certain questions because they're new to their process. And then the benefits from the other side is when you go somewhere and you see how another company is doing something, it's incredible, like how much you can take away from that and go, oh wow, and it just turns things on its head, in a lot of ways. So.
And I think we can also adapt techniques or just find a way to use them in a higher ed setting. I think sometimes in higher ed, people think that, oh, that doesn't apply to me because that sounds kind of corporate. But as we were talking about before, a lot of these basic processes for running a business are the same. And just because higher ed may use some slightly different terminology doesn't mean they're not still having some behind the scenes administrative processes that are key to keeping the organization running, but are not the same kinds of words or phrases you'd use in a corporate setting.
That's right.
That's the point. Like there's a little bit of this like almost academia versus customer centric that can sometimes be competing forces with each other.
And to that, Mark, I would say, for those out there, as I think Bradley alluded to, the customer is super important. But in higher education, on the academic side, you use the word customer at UC Berkeley and you're looked at sideways. So we've taken customer and we've pivoted and used client and partner.
Or participant.
Okay? Right? And so they have to tell us where the project, or where the process is most important. But customer was, a hard word for academia. They didn't understand it. And in fact, it came off negative. So over time, we've adopted client and partner.
Good point.
I've found success with using an ellipsis when talking about customer. So when I say customer, I take a moment to pause and say, and what I mean by that is the faculty that we're reducing administrative burden on, the phenomenal research scientist clinician who gets to see more patients now as a result of an improved process if you're working in an academic medical center, or the student that gets to graduate in 4.5 years instead of 5 and now has a lower debt burden to repay. Right, so those are customers, and I think it's really important to, as Tracy had mentioned, be a zealot about the word customer and help people understand what that means in this setting.
Yeah, we've found a lot of great luck with, as I mentioned earlier, spreading the knowledge of Lean Six Sigma within our projects. And so we think each of our projects has a team and they are part of that team. And so if the customer doesn't even realize that they're the customer because they're just part of a team that's trying to bring about a change, that also is a great way to sort of bring them along. And I find that as soon as you make them part of that team, they want to, as I said, they want to be heard. they want to speak, they want, their knowledge, and they want to share, because no one wants to work in a bad process, and they want to make these changes. They just never, I think it's some people don't know where to find someone to listen to them, and to find someone who wants to work on that and help to influence and make those changes, even if it's coming from the ground up to someone in leadership. But building those teams and those communities has been really successful for us.
I think that's a great way to bring in the voice of the customer, because you're really kind of making them part of the team, and that's fantastic.
I'm going to throw out a little maybe contrary view. It's a little bit of a caution that I've seen in the dynamic that can develop within improvement events and whatnot. If you get everybody in the room and say, we're all the customer, you really don't have a customer. I think the dynamic tends to work best, from what I've seen, if the customer is always external to the team a little bit, right? You can have people that, we're involved, we're partners, we want to make the customer happy, we want to deliver value to the customer. But if it's too internally serving, you don't tend to make as clear or good decisions, or at least that's something I think I've found or seen.
Well, the external customer really is the end goal, right? That's the end point.
Right.
And that's the person for whom we're trying to make the process successful, trying to make it better.
I would just help by also saying what both Eric and Mark are alluding to here so people know there's 450 people on the call right now. That's exciting. And Lean and Six Sigma are two kind of areas that got put together for real clear reasons. But I just want to be very clear that no matter what industry you're dealing with, you're really using a systematic, repeatable problem-solving approach. That is the beauty of Six Sigma. So for those on the call who don't know, just like project management, PMP, whatever it may be, Six Sigma uses an acronym called DMAIC, and that stands for Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, and Control when you're looking to improve processes. That is a structured, repeatable methodology that can be used with different tools at different times. The voice of the customer piece that Eric and Mark are alluding to, and external customers, they give you feedback because they receive the benefits of that value stream. But the subject matter experts in the facilitated session are the ones that live and breathe this process every day. And they need to hear what the customer needs, but the customer doesn't do this. So why I break down this systematic approach for you very briefly is that as you're going through a define, a measure, an analyze, improve, and control, you're using different tools at different times based on the toolkits that's given. Lean on the front of that really focuses on waste and removing waste from processes so that they can become more efficient. So together you put them together and you get the Toyota approach, which is the respect for people and continuous improvement merged with a systematic culture of improving problems. So I just wanted to lay that foundation because I know there's a lot of foundational questions in the chat that we didn't kind of give a basic foundation. So I was trying to do that very briefly.
Appreciate that. And I think this introduces another thing for us to think about and to share some insights on, and that is, how do students benefit from learning techniques such as the Lean or Lean Six Sigma practices, both in and out of the classroom?
Well, I can start out speaking to that. So right now at Cal Poly, we typically have like 80 students a quarter, or about 320 students a year, because we also do it in the summer, moving through my Lean Six Sigma Greenbelt class. And it's always pretty gratifying to me when we have our career fairs and students are going out trying to get summer internships or jobs. And I usually give them a little bit of a pep talk before they go out and say, well, as an icebreaker in a conversation, when you say, are you guys doing anything in Lean? And their eyes light up and, yeah, we got this going. Or the other side is, boy, I've heard we have something. Let me go ask Joe or Susie, because I know nothing about it. But it is something I think is exciting for students. My students are are accountants, marketing students, engineers. You know, there's a whole breadth and cross section of students that are getting exposed to us. And one of the ways I look at it is I'm trying to graduate the first generation of lean ready students. They won't have to go out and learn it on the street like we all did. You know, they'll actually have some education and background and know the kinds of things Chris was talking about, of the differences between Lean and Six Sigma and theory of constraints and all the different little Japanese words and acronyms that we toss around so easily here.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Eric. And it's not about the Japanese words. For anybody that might be getting hung up on Kaizen and all the different Japanese words, but at its foundational root, it's really, you know, a set of practical methods and techniques for critical thinking and problem solving. And that's, I mean, at its foundation, that's sort of what it is for me anyway.
Yeah. Let's take a moment. We've gotten a request to give an example of a Lean Six Sigma project and talk about what the problem was and how it was solved and what the result was of making that improvement. So Yura, do you want to on the spot, but do you want to an example project?
Yeah,
just
since this is so new to me in a way, I'll actually give the one that we chose for our Greenbelt project, which you mentioned earlier that it doesn't always have to be hiring, but we found that travel is another thing that comes up a lot because at our university, the travel process goes through a lot of different steps and departments, and it's different for every department based off of the rules. So we chose that within just our department, so the College of Letters and Science, and we do a fair bit of travel within our department. So we had a lot of sort of data to show how travel was run and also to show how it was being approved. So our goal was really to make the approval process efficient and to make sure that we were in compliance with the approval process, because we found that not all of the boxes were being checked, not all of the approvals were being met. And so we defined what that was. And because it was a Greenbelt project and I'm coming in as new, we really had to work through what was the problem and really work through each parts of the stage. And it was a great learning experience for me. And so defining what the problem was, and as I said, we found that the problem was really that we were not in compliance for a lot of the approval. So we then had to look at the data of when the approvals were coming in, and we were able to gather a lot of that. Measuring, which is the after define, is sometimes a hard stage to gather information because we are not always great about gathering data of when this paper was turned in to this person and when this person was released this paper to someone else, which is often how a lot of our processes are, which this was a paper-based process. And then we went through and analyzed, and the analyze phase is really where we got back to redefining our problem, because we realized as we started to analyze that paper process, we realized that the problem we were having was the signatures. We weren't getting approval and people were traveling, using money before the full approval was complete. And then we went on to improving that, and as I said, it was paper. And so we wanted to make it so that it was not a paper-based process, so that we could actually gather data concrete to see when the approvals were happening, who was approving, again, I said when, before money was spent. That was the goal, really. And so we moved it into an electronic system that had approvals that could gather all of that information, route it correctly to who it needed to be routed to as well, which is another issue we were having. It would sit in someone's box. And I should say we learned a lot of that during a process walk in the define stage. We walked the process and saw how it would sit with someone for a long time before it was picked up and moved to the person who it needed to go with. And so walking the process really taught us where we were having issues. And then in the control stage, so we're still in that. We were constantly making improvements, and that's what I really like about the Lean Six Sigma, is that you're always improving your process. So we come back to that travel process now. It's been I think a year or so since we made that first, and so we've come back and now we're looking, how could we change that? What could we do now to, again, make sure we're still in compliance, but make it better for the customers, which in our case are the users and the members of the department.
So you heard do a really wonderful job of walking through define, measure, analyze, improve, and control, right? She walked through each of those. The simplest takeaway for all those out there is every time you go to improve a process, you have to see what you do. So bring it and make it transparent to everyone, and you go from your current state through a transition state to what you hope is an improved future state. It is that simple on the highest level. And a little change management plug here is if you're going from your current state to an improved future state, there are people that have to go through that and do something differently. Yeah. If we forget that those people are going to have to do their job in the future state differently, and we don't focus on the change management aspects of helping those people navigate the change to that new future state, be as successful with our projects. I just wanted to add that piece.
That's a really great point. And as I mentioned, DocuSign was really what brought on our change, our Lean Six Sigma sort of growth at UC Santa Barbara. And with COVID and everything, everyone immediately had to move to DocuSign. And so that has changed how we work and how everyone, and we've realized that to address the change management of that, make sure people were along with it and that they were part of understood what they need to do, part of the change. We've done forums, meetings, really trying to reach out to the community. But now our goal is to take our Lean Six Sigma journey and also add in more about change management, because we really realize that's such an important piece of this and isn't always sort of part of higher education.
Yura, I think what you captured along every step of the DMAIC process was so important, because to be a successful practitioner, you can distill it down to 2 words: show me. So at the define phase, show me that it's a problem. How did you capture the customer voice? At the measure phase, show me what the process is actually doing. At the analyze phase, show me why this is a problem, why this needs to be the priority to solve. And in the implementation phase, show me the pilot phase. How do you proof of concept these ideas in order to improve this solution? So I think from not only the benefit to the processes that these initiatives eventually improve, but to the people that are tuning in today that maybe think, is this a potential avenue for my own professional development? I would say that absolutely it is. Either you need to have deep specialized knowledge in an area to succeed, or you need to be a project manager using a methodology that helps these specialists work together. There was a question in the chat for a specific example. If I have a minute to give my own, a recent one was working with the Department of Psychiatry to improve their residency program. So they had a round that became notorious for dissatisfaction among the resident students. And there were a lot of assumptions thrown out, by chairs and by leadership and program directors. And the question was, show me, well, I heard that while I was doing rounds with a resident physician. Okay, but was that captured somewhere? So we came up with a way to survey, and we used a program called IdeaWave to get a conversation with the students to help them to crowdsource what the actual problems were. And then we went to a measurement phase where it wasn't some sophisticated module with an Epic that was getting us data while they're on their rounds. It was a piece of paper and a tick sheet that said, here's the problem that I recurringly have. Here's how many times that it happened from Monday to Friday. Right? And that helped us isolate the actual problem. So along the way, it was show me. And these were just incredibly intelligent psychiatrists. And I like to joke that as a Lean Six Sigma practitioner, I'm the least qualified person in every room that I walk into. But it's awesome to be able to use these tools to help aggregate the knowledge of subject matter experts to come up with a solution to improve their problems.
And I think another important aspect of this is not jumping to a solution, because sometimes folks want to just, as soon as they get a basic understanding of a problem, they want to immediately jump to solving it. And I think that the kind of techniques that Brad and Yura were talking about make sure that you have a good understanding of the problem, and then go to the root causes before you start identifying possible solutions that could address those root causes. And that means you don't jump to one and then find out later that it was the wrong solution because you didn't hit the right root cause. So this is another area where the right problem-solving techniques can be used in a variety of situations. And you don't have to be the deep expert, but you do need to know how to engage with the folks who are the expert practitioners and get them thinking about, what's really the root cause of the problem at hand, and do some diagnostics and be able to demonstrate through data that, yeah, we understand why this is happening. Mark, you're nodding. It looks like you want to add.
No, actually, I was going to say a version of what you just said, which is why I was nodding. Yeah. So. Yeah,
well, I'm glad we're on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
So for those out there, Katie mentions root cause, and there's, that's a tool, right? You can do a 5 whys tactic. You can do a fishbone. Those are 2 tools to allow you to arrive at the root cause, so you're solving the right problem. At the fundamental level, what problem are we trying to solve has to be asked up front and over throughout the methodology.
And it's hard not to jump to solution. It's so easy to just you have some bias of some kind, or you feel like you know where the root cause is, and it's so easy to focus a lot of your energy on that. And it's really hard to to kind of step back and go, let's work the process and find out what the real root cause is.
And the idea is we don't want to put a Band-Aid on it, right? We don't want Band-Aid fixes if we can avoid it. We want quick wins, but root cause helps us put the real countermeasure in place to be able to pilot it and operationalize the solution in the fabric of the institution. That's the key, root cause, right? Because if we don't, we just put Band-Aid fixes on it and they're not sustainable. So we want sustainable solutions to our problems.
Absolutely. And to touch on the culture or the change management component that you were talking about earlier, and Bradley kind of talked about this a little bit as well, where, that's why it's really important to have, if you're trying to improve a process, try to get as many people on the team that, have a touch point on that process. So they're part of the solution, so they're actually seeing what the current state problems might be, and then they become part of the solution, and it helps get buy-in for why you're making the change.
So I was wondering if I could roll the conversation back a little bit, and I apologize, but I heard a word that always kind of gets me thinking, and you're talking about like the compliance, as being sort of a benefit, and I have jumped on the compliance bandwagon, probably more out of convenience than belief a lot of times. I would like. And this maybe takes us back to the idea of lean in higher education. I would like our organization, like Cal Poly, to be more a value-based organization than a compliance-based organization. And by that, when people say compliance, I think of policies. I think of the chancellor's office writing these documents that, we gotta do this. And I'm not always sure those people know exactly, what the real value is that they're trying to achieve. So as a roadmap to getting to that customer value piece, sometimes those compliance documents are not always the best. And I like to start out some of my improvement events with a deeper dive or discussion of exactly what are we trying to do with that compliance. I think there's value added and non-value added.
And why are you doing it?
Oh yeah, and I completely agree that that was something that came up quite a bit, and I think there are a lot of policies and things that are written but are not, the folks who are actually doing the work maybe don't understand why of that, and so, but they're doing it because it's how we always do things. And I think that's something else to bring up, sort of to bring it to often the processes that we're looking at to make improvements are things that have been done the same way for 20 years, and it's just how we do it. And so if any of the attendees have ever been in one of those where, why are we doing it this way? Why is this, and so you may come in what you think is the problem, but that will often change as you start to look at and go through the DMAIC process. So we're using a lot of jargon, a lot of terms that go with Lean Six Sigma, but it really is why are we doing this way? How can we make an improvement? Because even you as a member of that part of that process, or maybe you as the customer of that process, or the person who benefits from that process, don't understand what the purpose is. How is this adding value to what I do as and part of my job? How is it adding value to, let's say, a student, to my experience at my university? Is this helping me to get to my goal of graduating and earning my degree? If it isn't, why is that happening? What can we look at? So you're really looking at it from that standpoint. And compliance was what we went through was Green Six. I probably would have, yeah. But yes, I completely agree with that there are many policies that as we go through it, we're looking at why does this policy exist? How can we, change it? But that's a whole another thing.
There's a famous phrase. There's a famous phrase that's, this is the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
And you hear that. I bet you if we ask the 400 people, how many times do you hear this is the way we've always done it? That right there is usually a beautiful clue to say there's area for improvement there. Because that's usually an opportunity.
And one of the benefits of beyond helping the student in this case of achieving their goal in a more efficient manner, a lot of the times those of us in the process are victims of the process, and we're stuck in bad processes, and it's beneficial to all of us that are in it to help streamline that, because then we find that we're eliminating things that we thought we had to do that we really don't.
So we're to the point where we're about to need to transition to do some general Q&A. So I'd like to get your thoughts on if you had one piece of advice to give folks starting a Lean Six Sigma or continuous improvement program on their campus, what would it be? Who wants to start?
Well, let's see. So if you go first, you get to do the easy ones. Then the other end, they do the harder ones, right? So I think we've discussed this or described this dynamic a little bit, but I think it's really good to not only train people in the concepts and the problem solving, but also to get improvements at the same time, right? So it's a cliche at Cal Poly, learn by doing, but I think rather than saying, well, we're going to send you to this course for 10 months and then you're going to come back and maybe do something, teach them a little bit and then have them practice it and try it. So, kind of the training and doing, I think is a real good recommendation on how to get started in this.
And I would add, anybody that's thinking about doing something, be open, be open to having your beliefs disproven, and having that paradigm, I think is really important.
Well, and also be prepared to disprove other people's paradigms as well. It's the thing about pioneers is you get your name in the history book, but you also get arrows in your back.
Yeah, or your head chopped off.
I like the motto, trust the process. Even though we're looking to improve that, what that says by saying trust the process is that everything has a process. From making peanut butter and jelly to tying your shoes to the most complex processes at the university, there is a process. And for those people that say there's no process, we don't know what we do. It's just because it hasn't been documented.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Trust the process.
I would say as an early practitioner, share success, because that's how you get people underneath your tent. So if you are the first black belt within your VC area or at the entire university, I've worked at university systems before prior to my UC life, in which I was an island of lean knowledge. Nobody knew the terminology. I had to dance around concepts. I had to beg, borrow, and steal for data. Mm-hmm. It's amazing to be at UC San Diego where there's this ingrained culture, but that I also understand that that's not everywhere you go. So if you find yourself a little bit isolated, it requires a little more bravery to say why a solution is data-driven, even if it's not the most popular thing to say. So when you do have a chance for success and you get the chance to share it, you better say it so much louder than the detractors, because otherwise you're just not going to turn that ember into a flame.
Yeah.
What's your one piece of advice?
I was just going to add, there was a question earlier, I think, in the if you have to go through the cohort route, which is what I mentioned that UCSB is doing, and that, of course, no, as Bradley said, you could be the only person who has a green belt or black belt, or even just starting with the white belt or yellow belt, so just learning about it. But as you start to talk about it, as you start to build that community, I think that's really important. Just find people that want to talk to you, and if you can't find people, create that conversation so that you're spreading the word. And then as Brother said, if people start to see those improvements and they know how you got to that improvement, they're going to want to be involved and want to spread that knowledge, and then it will grow. And so that, I think, is really a way that you can build that yourself.
I think those are all really great recommendations. And we are at the point in time where we are going to start taking some audience Q&A. Questions have been coming through via the Q&A function in our webinar. So how do we choose? I'm sure we've got a lot of great questions, Tracy.
Wow, I've been very busy over here typing some voracious answers to things, but some of these things we need your support and help because you guys work for the universities. So the first question, and I'll go ahead and read it, and then you tell me if you would like to respond. We do have a lot of questions, so maybe one or two people can respond to each question. So the first one comes from Alex. How has your training in Lean Six Sigma helped your campus to quickly shift some outdated processes to streamlined, digitized processes during this pandemic? So I'll just first say that I know UC San Diego has a huge effort to digitize processes, but this is asking around during the pandemic as well. Does anybody want to respond to that question?
I can start, and if folks can add to it. So as I mentioned, when we moved, when the COVID forced UCSB to shut down, everyone had to move to DocuSign or another digital process, not always DocuSign, again, not jumping to a solution. But in this case, it was actually where we had a solution. We had to teach people how to use it, but then as they would jump to the solution, we were sort of backtracking and going through the process improvement process sort of the other way around. So it really made us have to be flexible on our team and make sure and work with the groups really closely so that they could start to think about their process besides just plopping it into another system. And so working through the process, so sometimes it went slower than they would want, but by building a sort of conversation with those departments like human resources, accounting, we have worked, make sure that we can get something that's out to the public or to our community on campus that is the best, most improved process, but as quickly as possible. So I guess in a way it's sped up a lot of what we would normally have gone through with the DMAIC, but we're still going through that and they may just not know it always. We may have to use some of the tools behind the scenes and they don't know that they're working on a process map with us as we're taking notes, or that we are analyzing, the whys, or we're asking them 5 whys. We're not using a diagram to show them, but we're asking them those questions so we can get to a solution and get to an improved product once it's out there. And then we also, for us, because DocuSign is the solution everyone wants to go to, we also are showing them that that's not always the solution. So we have to sometimes say, no, let's find something else. And so then that forces them to, again, go back, start with the full process and think about what would be a better solution. How can we get that on campus? What do we have access to already? What do we need to get?
And how can we make the process sound before we try to automate it?
Yes.
I think that's really key. You got to have a good process first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, the digitization thing, it's happening, right? And it's not being directed by me, and it's not being driven by our lean folks, at least at Cal Poly, but it is happening. So one of the things I'm starting to think about is, wow, there's a lot of good stuff that has happened. There's some sort of questionable stuff that has happened in the name of digitization. And how do I keep the good stuff and then, roll back the bad stuff or get rid of the bad stuff as we go forward? So that's an open question, I think, for lean practitioners and people going forward.
Yeah, it's only as good as your process. I mean, you can use all the RPA you want and the automation you want and the digitization you want. But at the end of the day, you can't use RPA or automate anything if you don't have a process up front. And the better that process is, garbage in, garbage out. Process never go away.
Yes, and we've seen a lot of people automating bad processes, right? It's so painful to try to to fix that process. Good. I have another question from Heidi Monk. There's, I think, a lot of answers to this. So the question is, do you have buy-in by all departments, or are you requiring adoption of Lean Six Sigma? Like, I guess that would be forcing them. I don't know what that means. I think that's what the belts are for. I am working on processes for one department that we're running into roadblocks from someone in the next step of the process who either feels threatened by someone else or they feel like they're stepping on toes trying to understand the next steps. Help me. That's what she wants to know.
Change management, resistance management, 100%.
Well, and that's where if you can bring that person or somebody from that department into your project and what you're trying to figure out with your current state, and they see how broken the current state is, hopefully you can get some buy-in with regards to that. But it's natural. It's human behavior. Like, if you work in, an admissions department and you go to IT or accounting or any other department or registration and you're like, tell us how you do this and why do you do that and why do you do this? People are going to feel threatened and they're going to get defensive.
Yeah, definitely. We always say, do a process walk, involve everybody, walk the process together. That might be a little hard right now, but it really shows the pain in every department, and people just want to fix the pain. If they stop fighting each other because they see how the pain is. Anyone else want to make a suggestion for Heidi?
I'll add just, you taught us, Tracy was my instructor for my green belt, and you always taught us that it's the process, not the people. And so we repeated that a lot during our, when we did our project and in other projects, just to remind people that we're looking at this. And the thing is that sometimes someone on that team created the process. So they also feel there's another sort of personal feeling to it, because it's not that they're in the process, just that they're in process. This is their process. So by really making sure they understand, and Mark said, going through the process walk, they can see what other people are experiencing in the process they created, and that it's, that we're trying to make improvements to make their work more efficient as well, really does help quite a bit.
Yeah.
To speak directly to Heidi as well, I would say that taking a step back, and even the way the question was phrased, I don't mean to be antagonistic here, but the idea that a roadblock is not a person, that person just happens to be there where that step in the process is your roadblock, right? So even framing the question that way, even if it's unintentional, somebody is drawing their identity from that step in the process. So even couching the question or the roadblock in those terms, it comes across to that person as well. So thinking about it continually as the process and not the person being the roadblock, they just happen to be there. They just happen to be administering that step in the process where the roadblock occurs. So changing your frame of mind is going to help.
Yeah, excellent point, Brad.
Yes, thank you very much. And by the way, if you hear typing, that's me typing all your responses to this person. So I'm multitasking here. Okay.
Thank you, Tracy.
But Tracy, you know that Zoom is going to provide a transcript, right?
Well, great, thanks. But I won't have
It's leaner that way.
I won't have the answer in the text, so I'm putting it in. I'm okay with that, if you guys are. Okay, let's see here. Okay, here's a good one. This is from Anna Lou. Did UCSD leadership, really, and I think this applies to anybody, did some person or group pitch Lean Six Sigma to leadership and get buy-in? And if so, what were the key arguments to secure leadership buy-in? Who wants to speak to that?
Okay, so this would be secondhand knowledge, because I wasn't in those early conversations, but it was an easy sell. Our Chancellor Koselleck got it right away. He's a researcher and an academic by training. He understands the statistical rigor that comes from the Six Sigma portion of the Lean Six Sigma house. So seeing that as an opportunity for business optimization across all VC areas on the campus is such an easy sell. And I understand how exceptionally rare that is and how blessed we should feel at UC San Diego to have that ease of adoption, because that doesn't happen everywhere. So, you know, it may be a little bit pie in the sky to recount how Lean Six Sigma occurred at UC San Diego, because it's not going to be that easy for everyone.
Anyone else want to respond?
Well, speaking from UC Santa Barbara, we were able to leverage what UC San Diego did. So I would encourage folks, if they have an example from another campus that they can cite and say, look what these folks are doing, it's been done a world of good, and then translate that experience to your own campus. That's really beneficial, because we also had one of our vice chancellors who had come from UC San Diego. So he was able to say, oh, yes, I completely second that idea that this would be beneficial to bring to UC Santa Barbara. So we had folks in leadership positions who were making the pitch saying, you know, this is going to make a difference. We could point to another school's experience to say it worked with them, and you can talk to them and they will give you some affidavits or, you know, share their success stories. So that helped a lot in the early days at UC Santa Barbara.
That video that was presented at the beginning of today's event, I would go back and find those names and try to, you know, if you're at another UC or another institution, you know, find your IT services director or vice chancellor to speak to Vince Kellen, have your CFO talk to Pierre Rouillet, have your executive vice chancellor or academic affairs department talk to EVC Simmons, and they will tell you why it's important to have it on your campus.
And this is a community. I mean, higher education is a community, and things like this and the you know, communities of practice all sharing with each other. And if you're at a university where you haven't done any of this, I agree wholeheartedly with Katie. If you can share other people's successes, because you don't have any of your own successes yet to share, you know, really kind of share some of those successes. And if you get through to somebody, you can really kind of smooth the path.
Oh, somebody had their phone on. Okay, very good, excellent, thank you. I wasn't able to type all that, so I'm glad that we have the feed that will be recorded. So people are really wanting to know, can someone just provide a very simple example of a Lean Six Sigma project? They basically say, I'm very new, I think I'm over my head right now. What is just a simple example of a process improvement? Anybody want to share?
The over the head feeling never goes away, by the way.
No, you're a
I'll give it
earlier.
I can give an example of another fairly simple project. We had, for when I was doing our Greenbelt project, we have a data warehouse on campus, and we were looking at the ways that people request access to the data warehouse. And we had an email mechanism that people were using, and we were able to look at the email requests that had come in over time, see how they broke down into different categories for the different kinds of things that people were asking for help with. We narrowed in on the data access requests, and we studied how long it was taking typically to ask for the access and who had to get involved in the approval cycle. And then we did some root cause analysis of why were things taking as long as they did. We came up with some potential solutions to address those root causes that we had discovered. We checked the different possible solutions against the, did a quick analysis of how quick would it be to implement, how much benefit would it give us. We picked a couple of solutions to try, we implemented those, and then we demonstrated that they indeed had improved the cycle time for getting someone access to the data warehouse. And we were also able to demonstrate that it reduced the number of errors associated with it. So then we had implemented these improvements. It was a fairly simplistic Google form we were using but compared to the way the process had originally worked and all of the steps in the process, we were able to reduce the number of steps and the time. So that's an example of a pretty simple project, but it did result in benefits.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Katie. This is going to be the last question, and then we're going to do our wrap up for our first session for Palooza Tuesday. And the question is, it's kind of a long one. My office provided resources to train everyone at the white belt level and then informed us that there were no additional resources available and that we should individually focus on the 20% of work that is in our complete control to apply the concepts. Is this a common practice? Should Lean Six Sigma be approached individually without coordination within the office or resources? Anyone want to answer that? This is from an anonymous attendee.
Sounds like a trick question to me. No, that's where I was saying. I think it's, the basic approach. We don't do mass training at Cal Poly, and we don't do like everybody has to go to the white belt class. We say, okay, who has a process that they're having problems with? Raise your hand. It's a coalition of the willing. Let's get a small group together to try to fix something, and I'll teach you as we go. Would be more my preferred approach. It's nice if everybody knows about it at the white belt level and there's awareness sort of generally out there, but I hate to teach somebody or have a bunch of people go to classes and then 2 years later come back and say, do you remember, what we taught you 2 years ago? It doesn't work with my students, and it's like, we taught you this last quarter, you don't remember it, right? So that's kind of where I come down on that. Hopefully that's not a common experience for other folks.
Okay, how about one more, and then we're going to move to the prize and some closing comments.
I'll add to that because I think Chris mentioned this when he was talking about the architecture, that their departments are very siloed often. And so we sometimes ask them to focus on the part of the process that they can control and make improvements there, because there often is space for that. And so it's unfortunate that you're asked that to focus on that 20%, but think of that as an opportunity to make those improvements in that area that you can control. And hopefully as people see those improvements, they can, maybe there will be some more sort of motivation from leadership to expand that, because if you can improve your part of the process, then maybe that can, the next part of the process, another thing that connects to that can also be improved. So that's just one other thought.
Or find somebody from another department that's like-minded, and turn that 20% into 40%.
To 40%, yeah.
Indeed.
To start.
Well, you guys were all very insightful today. I want to thank you for your time and dedicating your knowledge to this panel. And we really appreciate your attendance on our first Palooza Tuesday. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, now it is time for...
Thank you all.
Now it is time for the question that we're going to go ahead and see if a participant has an answer for. So we covered a lot of ground. And what I'm going to do is I actually picked an easy one this time. Well, I think it's easy. But so what we're going to do is we will, whoever types first in the chat window will be the winner. And so the question is, if you wanted to participate in the Central Coast Lean group, who on the panel would you contact? Whoa! That was so fast, I can't even tell who the first person was. It looks like Erica Eckschwalder wins with the fastest fingers on this session. Woohoo! That's great. Nice job. Okay, so we are going to get that to you. Great job. Also wanted to let you know that the video that we showed earlier to kick off the session is now available on the website, and all resources will be emailed to attendees. So we have links, and you'll have the recording. And that's all the time we have for today. So thank you so much for joining our first Process Palooza, or Palooza Tuesday. We're going to be back next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific for our session called Empowerment and Innovation. And it's mostly about cultivating a continuous improvement movement. So it's really a session that's going to highlight a lot of UCSD folks in various functions and departments. And they're going to be talking about how they transform UC San Diego with Lean Six Sigma. So ideally, it's if you're interested in that kind of a topic, you definitely don't want to miss that session. UC San Diego has really been blazing the trail for the all UC institutions for deploying Lean Six Sigma. So if you have a strong interest in seeing some of the things that they're doing to really be effective and make a difference, I would definitely attend. Don't forget to register at processpalooza.ucsd.edu. And also, one last action item, and that is you're going to get a survey email. Please give us some feedback so we can make some adjustments, and let us know what you thought of today's first Palooza Tuesday. I'm Tracy O'Rourke, and I am signing off. Thank you for attending, and have a great rest of your Tuesday.